The Galactic Collective had, in its infinite wisdom and approximately 7,000 years of bureaucratic experience, developed a planetary classification system so comprehensive that it required 3 separate committees, 14 subcommittees, and one very overworked artificial intelligence just to maintain it. Class I worlds were paradises, garden planets, where you could presumably frolic naked through fields of non-sentient flowers without worry. Class I twirl worlds, on the other hand, were what happened when the universe decided to concentrate all of its creative malevolence into a single spinning ball of organic hatred. Cathar was a Class I twirl Deathworld, and it wore that designation like a badge of honor. The planet had earned its classification through sheer dedication to being absolutely insufferable to biological life. Its atmosphere contained enough sulfur dioxide to make breathing without filtration equivalent to gargling battery acid. The local flora had evolved 3 separate methods of killing things, apparently just for variety. The fauna made the flora look downright charitable by comparison. Even the weather was personally offended by the concept of survival. Storms rolled through with acidic rain that could strip paint off starship hulls, and that was on a calm day. The orbital surveys had been clear. Nothing with a central nervous system could survive on Cathar for more than 6 hours, even with standard environmental protection. The fact that the planet had a breathable oxygen-nitrogen mix underneath all that sulfur was just the universe's idea of a cruel joke, like putting a candy shell on poison, which made it absolutely perfect for strip mining operations. No indigenous life meant no pesky conservation laws, no ethical debates, no protesters chaining themselves to rocks. Just pure, unregulated resource extraction. The Collective Mining Consortium had already filed the paperwork and paid the processing fees to begin operations within the solar cycle. All that remained was a routine xenobiological survey to confirm what everyone already knew. Nothing lived here, nothing could live here, and nothing would be stupid enough to try living here. The survey team consisted of 4 individuals who represented peak galactic diversity and shared a collective overconfidence that would have impressed a philosophy professor. There was Vex, a Throssian whose species had evolved on a moon with 0.3 standard gravity and considered a light breeze to be a natural disaster. His environmental suit was rated for Class I worlds and had more redundant safety systems than a nuclear reactor. Beside him stood Quillix, a gelatinous Foraxi who existed in a mobile containment unit because her homeworld's environment was basically a temperature-controlled spa. The team's biologist, Norvench, was a 6-limbed Crethari who came from a world so pampered that their cities had weather control, and their idea of wilderness was a designated park with safety railings. Rounding out this collection of galactic soft living was Tech, a synthetic consciousness housed in a drone body, who liked to remind everyone that he technically didn't need protection but wore it anyway to make the organics feel better. They descended through Cathar-IX's atmosphere in a shuttle that was probably worth more than a small space station, and the planet immediately began trying to kill them. Acidic precipitation detected, Tech announced cheerfully, as something that definitely was not water started hammering against their hull. pH level of 2.3. That is dissolving our outer shielding at a rate of 0.005 millimeters per minute. Wonderful, Vex muttered, checking his suit's integrity for the 14th time since landing protocols began. Remind me why we could not simply scan from orbit. Protocol, Quillix gurgled from her containment sphere. Must have boots-on-ground confirmation of zero indigenous life before mining authorization proceeds. The regulations are very specific about. The shuttle lurched as something large slammed into it from the side. What in the 17 hells was that? Norvench's translator crackled, his 6 limbs gripping various handles throughout the cabin. Aerial predator, Tech reported, displaying telemetry data. Approximately 4 meters wingspan. Appears to have mistaken our shuttle for prey, despite us being metal and on fire. It attacked something that is on fire. Vex's voice climbed an octave. To be fair to the predator, everything on this planet is probably on fire at some point. It is adapting to local conditions. They landed in a clearing that the automated systems identified as least immediately lethal, which was the kind of recommendation that inspired tremendous confidence. The moment the doors opened, Kathar 9's welcome committee arrived in the form of atmosphere that made every sensor simultaneously scream warnings. Sulfur dioxide levels at 37%, Norvench read off his scanner. Ambient temperature 42 degrees standard, humidity at 85%. Folks, we are essentially standing inside a hot, wet, poisonous lung. Poetry, Quillix said dryly. You should write travel brochures. They proceeded into the hellscape with the cautious enthusiasm of people who were being paid hazard bonuses, but not enough to actually feel good about it. The survey area was a 12-kilometer radius from their landing site. Standard procedure was to set up monitoring stations, collect samples, confirm the absence of anything that would complicate mining operations, and leave before the planet decided to get creative. Kathar 9 had other plans. The ground squelched beneath their boots, and Vex made the mistake of examining what he was walking on. Is this soil or something that used to be alive? Yes, Tech said helpfully. A plant that looked like someone had crossed a fern with a bear trap and given it ambition lunged at Quillix's containment sphere. Her automated defenses shocked it, and the plant retreated while making a sound that was either releasing spores or cursing in botanical language. 47 minutes remaining until first checkpoint, Norvench announced, keeping one eye on his chronometer and the other 4 on literally everything else. Then we can retreat to the shuttle and question our career choices. That was when they saw the smoke. It rose in a thin grey column about 3 kilometers to their northeast, distinct against the sickly yellow-green sky. Smoke meant fire, fire meant combustion. Combustion meant either volcanic activity or something burning organic material. Volcanic vent? Quillix suggested hopefully. Tech scanned the area. Negative. No thermal signatures consistent with geological activity. No natural gas deposits. No lightning strikes in the past 72 hours. The 4 of them stared at the smoke in silence, understanding the implication but not wanting to say it out loud because saying it out loud would make it real. It could be residual burning from a meteor impact. Vex tried. It could be. Norvench agreed. But we need to investigate. Do we, though? Quillix asked. Do we really need to investigate? Could we not just mark it as anomalous natural phenomenon and maintain plausible deniability? That is literally the opposite of our job description, Tech pointed out. They trekked toward the smoke, which was somehow the worst decision made by an exploratory team since someone decided to bring samples back from LV-426. The terrain actively attempted to murder them at least 6 times per kilometer. Something with too many legs and not enough regard for personal boundaries tried to climb inside Norvench's suit through a maintenance port. Vex nearly stepped into a puddle that his scanner identified as organically aggressive. A tree, an actual tree, attempted to drop a branch on them that weighed approximately the same as a small vehicle. Through it all, the smoke persisted, steady and unmistakable. They crested a small rise and found themselves looking down into a natural depression that was sheltered from the worst of the wind. And there, in the center of what could generously be called a clearing, was a human sitting on a log next to a fire, casually rotating a spit with some kind of meat on it. The human was wearing pants, boots, and a shirt with the sleeves rolled up. No environmental suit, no breathing apparatus, no protective gear whatsoever except what appeared to be a hat made from local plant fibers. The human looked up as they approached, smiled and waved. "Oh hey," the human called out. "Visitors, you folks want some food? I have got plenty." 4 alien minds simultaneously short-circuited. Vex checked his suit's atmospheric sensors, convinced they must be malfunctioning. Nope, still reading lethal levels of sulfur dioxide, still showing acidic compounds in the air, still indicating that unprotected organic life should be experiencing respiratory failure right about now. Quillix's translator made a sound like a confused wail. Norvench cycled through all 6 of his eyes, closing and opening them in sequence, testing whether this was some kind of shared hallucination brought on by environmental toxin exposure. Tech's drone body actually wobbled in the air. "I am detecting a biological humanoid, definitely alive, definitely breathing the atmosphere, definitely not wearing any protective equipment, and definitely roasting what my database identifies as meat from an apex predator over an open flame." The human stood up, wiping hands on pants in a gesture that was probably meant to be polite but just raised further questions. "Yeah, sorry about the setup here. Was not expecting company. Name is Renko. You folks are the first people I have seen in a..." The human checked a timepiece that looked like it had been assembled from spare parts and wishful thinking. "About 4 months now." 4 months? Vex's translator couldn't quite capture the full range of horror in his voice. "You have been on Kathar 9 for 4 months. That is what this place is called." Renko looked around, as if seeing the nightmare landscape for the first time. Bit of a mouthful. "I have just been calling it Tuesday." "You have been calling it what?" Quillix demanded. "Tuesday. You know, like a regular day. Bit of a rough start, but you adapt." Renko gestured at the meat. "Seriously though, you folks hungry? This is from a local predator. Tastes kind of like chicken but with more teeth. Had to smoke it for a while to break down some of the toxins, but it is pretty good." "Toxins," Norvench repeated faintly. "You are eating the local apex predator after smoking out its toxins." "Well, yeah, can't eat them raw. That would be stupid." There was a moment of profound silence during which 4 separate species independently experienced existential crisis. Renko seemed to interpret this as interest. "So that is a yes on the food. Come on, sit down. I mean, you folks look like you are about to tip over in those suits. Must be hot in there, huh?" "The suits are climate controlled," Tech managed. "They are maintaining optimal temperature while filtering out the atmospheric toxins that should be killing you." "Atmospheric toxins?" Renko sniffed experimentally. "Oh, you mean the sulfur? Yeah, that was rough for the first week. Burns the sinuses something fierce, but you get used to it. Human respiratory systems are pretty adaptable." "No," Vex said with feeling. "No, they are not. Nothing adapts to breathing sulfur dioxide. That is not how biology works." Renko said thoughtfully. "Well, I am breathing it, so apparently it is how biology works. Maybe your biology is just different." Quillix made a noise like a deflating bladder. "How did you even get here?" "Oh, that? Yeah, bit of a story actually." Renko pulled the meat off the fire, setting it on what looked like a flat rock that had been repurposed as a plate. "Was running cargo, independent contractor stuff, you know how it is, and my ship's navigation system decided to have a catastrophic disagreement with reality. Ended up with a forced landing here. Ship is totaled, completely unsalvageable. Managed to grab some supplies before the reactor went critical, but mostly I have been improvising. Improvising, Norvench echoed. You have been improvising survival on a Class-XII Deathworld. Is that what the classification is? Seems a bit dramatic, but sure. Renko started cutting the meat with a knife that appeared to be made from a sharpened piece of local stone lashed to a bone handle. Want to sit? I promise the logs are mostly non-toxic once you scrape off the outer layer. Against all common sense, survival instinct and several regulations they sat. Well, Quillix hovered in her containment sphere, and Tech just lowered his drone body to conversational height, but the principle held. So let me understand this correctly. Vex began, his translator working overtime to convey multiple layers of disbelief. Your ship crashed on Kathar 9, 4 months ago, and you have just been living here? Yeah, I mean, what else was I going to do? Wait for rescue in a crashed ship? Renko took a bite of the predator meat. Besides, once you get past the initial hostility, this place has a certain charm. Charm, all 4 of them said simultaneously. Sure. Nice weather once you get used to the acid rain. Lots of biodiversity. The local megafauna keeps things interesting. Renko pointed toward the tree line, where something large moved between the trees. See that? That is Bitey. Been following me around for about 2 months now. Think it might be imprinting, or maybe just planning the optimal moment to eat me. Hard to say. You named the predator that is stalking you, Quillix said slowly. I mean, we see each other every day. Would be rude not to give it a name. Norvench pulled out his scanner and pointed it at Renko. Your cellular structure is intact. No signs of toxin accumulation. Respiratory function appears normal. By all scientific understanding, you should be dead approximately 147 different ways, and yet here you are, eating barbecued predator and making friends with your stalker. Humans are pretty durable, Renko said with a shrug. You want to see the camp? Built a shelter over there, got a water filtration system running, even managed to cultivate some of the local plants. Turns out those purple root things are edible if you boil them 3 times and then bury them in mineral-rich soil for a week. Why? Tech asked, his usually steady vocal synthesis cracking slightly. Would you do any of that? Because raw they cause immediate unconsciousness and possible liver failure. Got to process them properly. No, I mean, why are you cultivating crops on a planet that wants you dead? Renko looked genuinely puzzled by the question. Because I got hungry. They followed Renko to what could generously be termed a settlement, and what would more accurately be called evidence of profound stubbornness. There was a shelter constructed from local materials, proof that humans could create livable housing out of spite and determination. A water collection and filtration system that would have made survival experts weep with joy. Several plots of cultivated plants arranged in neat rows, and most disturbingly, what appeared to be a juvenile specimen of one of the planet's mid-tier predators sleeping in a makeshift pen. That is Chomper, Renko explained. Found him injured about a month back. Nursed him back to health. He is very loyal now. Good for keeping away the bigger predators. You domesticated a predator, Vex said in a voice that suggested his worldview was currently being processed through a shredder. Domesticated is a strong word. More like we have an understanding. I feed him. He does not eat me, and he helps keep other things from eating me. It is a mutually beneficial arrangement. Norvench was scanning everything compulsively, his equipment probably trying to make sense of data that violated several fundamental principles of xenobiology. The shelter is structurally sound. The water system is actually ingenious. The crops are thriving. You have created a functional homestead on a planet classified as utterly inhospitable to organic life. Is it really that impressive? Renko asked. I am just doing what humans do. We adapt. No, Quillix burst out, her containment sphere bobbing aggressively. No, this is not adapting. Adapting is developing slightly larger lungs over evolutionary timescales. Adapting is growing thicker fur in cold climates across generations. Adapting is not looking at a planet that actively tries to kill everything with a respiratory system and going, well, I will just build a house and make friends with the murder fauna. Renko considered this. Okay, but counterpoint, I did do exactly that, so apparently it is adapting. You are breaking physics, Tech accused. Pretty sure I am just using biology, but I appreciate the compliment. Vex was examining the shelter's construction, noting how the materials had been carefully selected and treated. The acid rain alone should have dissolved these building materials within days. Oh, it did at first. Lost 3 roofs before I figured out you have to coat everything in sap from those orange trees, the ones that try to strangle you. Their sap is naturally resistant to the acid, really quite convenient once you stop them from murdering you long enough to harvest it. Convenient, Norvench repeated in the tone of someone whose entire education was being retroactively invalidated. You find it convenient that the hostile flora produces a substance you can use for construction. I mean, yeah, evolution is wild like that. Everything on this planet evolved here, which means everything on this planet has adaptations for surviving here. I just borrowed some of their homework. They stood in stunned silence, watching Renko check on the cultivated plants with the casual ease of someone tending a garden on a paradise world, rather than wresting agriculture from a planetary death trap. You have to leave, Vex said suddenly. This planet is scheduled for mining operations. It has been classified as uninhabitable. You cannot be here. But I am here, Renko pointed out reasonably. And I am inhabiting it. So maybe the classification is wrong. The classification is not wrong, Quillix insisted. The classification is based on comprehensive scientific analysis conducted by experts across a dozen species over several years. Cathar 9 is a Class-XII Deathworld. Nothing lives here. Renko gestured at the shelter, the crops, the sleeping predator, and ultimately itself. Evidence suggests otherwise. You are an anomaly. Norvench tried. An outlier. Your presence here is a statistical impossibility. Okay, but I exist, so clearly the statistics need updating. Tech's drone bobbed in what might have been the synthetic equivalent of a headache. What is your homeworld, if you do not mind my asking? Earth. Terra. Sol 3. Whatever you folks call it in your databases. There was a pause. Oh no, Quillix whispered. Oh no, what? Renko asked. Vex pulled up a holographic display, accessing the Collective's planetary database. He found Earth's entry, and went very still. Class-XII Deathworld. Gravity 1.0 standard. Atmospheric oxygen at toxic levels. Native fauna includes pursuit predators with pack-hunting behaviors. Natural disasters include earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanic eruptions, hurricanes and tornadoes. Microbial life so aggressive, it requires constant immune system warfare. Seasonal temperature variations of over 80 degrees. And humans evolved there. Yeah, Renko said. It is home. Kind of miss it, actually. Your homeworld, Tech said slowly, is also classified as a death world. Really? Huh. I mean, Earth can be a bit rough sometimes, but I would not call it a death world. More like character building. Norvench laughed. It was not a happy laugh. It was the laugh of someone whose entire understanding of biology had just been pushed down a flight of stairs. Your species evolved on a Class-XII Deathworld, which means your baseline for survival is already several tiers above what most species consider extreme conditions, and then you just casually applied those survival instincts to an even worse planet and made it work. When you put it that way, it sounds impressive, but really, I am just camping with extra steps. This is not camping, Vex said with feeling. Camping is a recreational activity conducted in controlled environments with emergency services available. This is survival against impossible odds on a planet that scientifically should have killed you on day one. Different perspectives, I guess. Renko checked the sun's position. Speaking of which, you folks should probably head back soon. When it gets dark, the really aggressive stuff comes out. The plants especially. They get mouthy. The plants get mouthy, Quillix repeated in a hollow voice. Yeah, the big ones near the sulfur vents. They shoot these barbed seeds that embed in you and then start growing. Lost a boot that way. Would not recommend. Renko paused. Actually, you folks want to stay for dinner first. I was going to make stew. Got some of those root vegetables, some of the predator meat, and I found these mushroom things that are only mildly hallucinogenic if you cook them right. Mildly hallucinogenic. Vex yelped. Yeah, they are great. Really take the edge off after a long day of not dying. They declined the dinner invitation, though Tech admitted later that he was curious about the mushrooms from a purely academic standpoint. The trek back to the shuttle was quieter than the journey out, each team member processing what they had witnessed in their own way. We have to report this, Norvench finally said as their shuttle came into view, miraculously still intact despite the planet's best efforts. Report what exactly? Quillix asked. That we found a human casually living on a Class-XII Deathworld, eating local predators, farming toxic plants, and making friends with the fauna. When you say it out loud, it sounds absurd, Vex admitted. It is absurd, Tech confirmed, yet also completely documented. I have hours of visual data that I myself do not believe despite having recorded it. They boarded the shuttle in silence, removing their protective gear with the careful movements of people whose worldviews had been thoroughly disrupted. Outside, Kathar 9 continued being a nightmarish hellscape, completely indifferent to the fact that somewhere on its surface, a human was probably seasoning another predator for tomorrow's lunch. The mining operation, Norvench said slowly. If we report Renko, they will have to halt operations pending environmental impact assessments. The collective has rules about inhabited worlds, but the planet is not inhabited. Quillix argued. It has one human who crashed here and refused to die appropriately. That is still technically inhabited. Do we mention this in the report? Vex asked the question they were all thinking. They looked at each other. 4 species, 4 wildly different evolutionary backgrounds, 4 distinct perspectives on survival and logic. And in that moment, they reached a unanimous, unspoken agreement that some things were simply beyond reasonable explanation. We found no indigenous life, Norvench said carefully. The planet remains classified as uninhabitable. Mining operations may proceed as scheduled. And the human? Tech asked. Vex shrugged, a gesture he had learned from humans and found remarkably efficient at conveying resigned acceptance. We tried to convince them to leave. They declined. What more can we do? We are not equipped to forcibly extract someone who has clearly made peace with living in hell. Besides, Quillix added, something tells me that if the mining equipment shows up, they will find Renko has already befriended the excavation drones and taught them to grow vegetables. They filed their report upon return to the orbital station. It was accurate, technically truthful, and completely failed to mention the most significant finding of their survey. The mining operation was approved within the solar cycle. Equipment was dispatched. Permits were processed. 3 months later, The mining foreman sent a confused message back to headquarters, asking why there was a human on Cathar-9, selling fresh produce to the mining crews and offering guided tours of the local dangerous fauna for a reasonable fee. The human had apparently negotiated a lease agreement for the land around the crash site, registered it as an agricultural claim, and was now running what could only be described as a homestead with a side business in extreme planetary tourism. The bureaucratic investigation that followed took 6 years and generated enough paperwork to require its own archive facility. The conclusion, ultimately, was that Cathar-9 remained classified as a Class-XII Deathworld, because no reasonable species would consider it habitable. Humans, it was noted in the amended files, were not reasonable. They were just very, very stubborn, and apparently that was a survival trait all its own. Somewhere on Cathar-9, Renko was probably teaching Baiti to play fetch with the mining equipment, and the universe continued its slow, confused acceptance that some species simply refused to acknowledge the concept of impossible. The xenobiological survey team never spoke of their findings publicly, but occasionally, late at night in whatever station bar they found themselves in, they would have a drink, shake their heads in synchronized disbelief, and remind themselves that they had done the only reasonable thing possible when confronted with the unreasonable. They had filed the paperwork and gone home. After all, what else could you do when you found a human roasting meat over a fire on a planet that should have killed them 100 different ways, smiling like they were on vacation, and offering you mushroom stew? You could accept that maybe, just maybe, the universe had a sense of humor, and that humans were the punchline to a cosmic joke that even the Deathworlds themselves did not quite understand.